Alrighty, welcome to another episode of Getting Real in the Field. And this is the show where we talk about all the things that you hate to do, which is following up, making phone calls, talking to people, recruiting, and just doing your job. And I'm your host, JP Llewellyn, and this is khek.
Oh my gosh.
What's up, khek? How you doing, man?
Oh man, I told you earlier, I am beat today. From digging fence posts to fixing cars today.
Hey, man,
It's a good Sunday.
jack of all trades, master of none is what it sounds like.
Oh, oh man. Yes, have a drink. My drink of choice is water.
And on that, cheers.
Cheers, man. So what do we want to cover tonight?
So I think right now, a lot of real estate teams and brokerages right now are really starting to kind of double down on their offerings and trying to really create better culture to help recruit and train agents in order to, prevent this. What do they do? Like agents like tend to hop around and try to find that perfect bullet, and really it's much more than that. And so I think we're going to talk about kind of the first steps on how to recruit agents to your team, and then we'll probably do another episode on how to keep those agents.
Okay. I love it. I think that, okay, so we're going to cover a series. It sounds like a series of podcasts on recruiting, building your team, and just retaining your team, really, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, you've grown and maintained a team for quite a few years already.
Yeah.
So why don't we cover you? Hey, I'm still learning the craft, man.
Let's do it.
Okay. So let's talk like you've shared with me in the past, and I'm going to kind of share what I've heard from this guy JP here is a lot of great advice over the years. Like, I mean, we've worked together for quite a number of years to get already. And, you've always kind of shared like tidbits of information, and it would be great this evening, just kind of coalesce and synthesize, the key things that you've talked about how to grow your team. Right. So,
yeah.
One of the things maybe you can kind of like expand on each of these topics, right? You talk about like knowing like the team's identity. What does that mean to you?
So, there's a lot of ways you can, create a team. I mean, there's different teams. There's the mega team where you just recruit.
Yeah.
There's the, mid-sized team where it's more like a family, you treat everybody as a family member. Then there's like the SEAL team where everybody's just razor focused. They're all in sync with the time, the amount of time they spend. They're all competing against each other on who's going to be the best. It's all about the numbers. It's all about, productivity. It's all about making as much money as humanly possible. So those are kind of the three categories of the types of teams that you can kind of create in the real estate business.
You've got so many different types of agents out there. Is there a right path, or is it just depending on what you're after, really?
I mean, honestly, it kind of comes back to the type of leader that you are, and then it also kind of comes back to what type of business you're trying to create. Because if you're trying to create a long-lasting sustainable business that may not need you as the leader later on, and you want to like bring somebody within your team to be the leader, then you just kind of have to pick the model that works best. But at the end of the day, the model that you choose, it needs to be a profitable model. And I would highly suggest that when you're really building a team, that leads are not the focus. Productivity and time management is the focus, and then leads come secondary.
Okay.
You need to have a profitable team before you start adding on paying for all these ridiculous amounts of leads.
Okay, so what I've heard from you is like, hey, make sure that you know what your identity is really, which is like, I'll put a couple of keywords in there, like, your values, the culture, and some of the goals that I've heard from you, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
you could do mission and vision and all of that. I mean, that's
yeah,
pretty standard in terms of like your business model. Um, but really your identity is what, as a team, is, you know, I've seen, are we a team that gives back? Because there's teams that give back and they do
yeah,
10% of everything and they're all about community and a community focused team. There's teams that are, you know, focused on, just productivity. They just want to be productive. They just want to grind. They just want to, be as profitable as humanly possible. And then there's the donation type team where every sale that they make, they donate, 10% to a charity of some
and
sort.
that I totally agree. I totally agree. Yeah. So then now let's talk a little bit about recruiting, right? You have always, and I thought this was pretty interesting because I've heard a lot of agents, and you've previously like worked, you were within a brokerage, EXP, and you always leverage your network to do recruiting. And I don't hear that from a lot of agents. It's like massive, like recruiting, advertising and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Um, why leverage your network?
So in this business, you meet a lot of agents across the country,
Yeah,
and their agents tend to are open to switching brokerages if the brokerage that they are at no longer serves them. So that can serve them in several areas, whether it's, I've reached kind of this point within my brokerage that I realize that I'm not getting the value out of the splits. So there
yeah,
could be something there. There could be a difference of opinion or leadership that you just no longer see eye to eye with the leadership that you have, whether that's the local leadership or the national leadership. There could be, the amount of tools and things that you're getting, may not be in support of the agent, whether, it could be just put back on the agent. Like, hey, we're just here, kind of like a subscription service where
mhm,
you just pay your monthly and then you're on your own, or there's, you have to, go out and find all these different tools and things like that, or the brokerage provides those tools for you. So you got to kind of have to evaluate. And then also, I would just look at your profitability. How much effort are you putting into your business? And then how much money are you getting out?
okay,
Because there's a thing out there that I like to call as fake value, where um we're like, oh, well, we provide marketing, or we provide flyers, or we provide business cards, or we provide all these things. And then when you kind of go back and run the numbers, it's like way cheaper to just go buy that stuff yourself on Vista
yeah,
instead of paying ridiculous splits or whatever.
yeah,
So you just got to have to be very, um, you know, and so by leveraging your network, I leverage my network by going to different events and traveling and going to things like this, and not necessarily just my own brokerages events, but
yeah.
like universal events like Inman or NAR or things like that, where there's a wide variety of agents from all over the country with different brokerage models and things like that.
Okay, okay, and that's really good. Like I said, what I've always heard from you and learned from you is like, don't just kind of when you recruit, you use your network rather than just kind of go straight out advertising and doing a lot of ads and stuff like that, right? Um, Now I'm just kind of curious also, the other thing that I always found interesting is like how you've, managed to create a collaborative environment really rather than sometimes you hear teams where they're just competing and with another, and it becomes a cat or dog eat dog world kind of thing, right? And how do you foster that collaborative environment within your team?
So we meet every week in person, and
Really?
we talk about different strategies on how to become more effective with the time that we have. Because it's the, what is it, the Pareto principle, or it's always 80-20, and in real estate it's more like 90-10. So no matter how much you share, they're not going to implement it. And this is why we have coaches,
Yeah.
because a lot of agents need a lot of hand holding, and it's like, hey, did you make your calls today? you know and unfortunately, when we've kind of dissected this over the years, the agents that need the most hand holding end up getting out of the business in 5 years,
Oh, really?
because they just can't get a grasp of their schedule. They just can't get a hold of it. Doesn't matter. They let everything infiltrate their schedule, and they just can't get a hold of their schedule. So they end up doing nothing. Well, they end up doing all the non real estate activities. So things like family and you know you know whatever, camping or other things are the priority,
Yeah.
rather than make it building a real estate business. And the thing is like, you've got to prioritize these things in order to have a sustainable business, and you can get there to where you can do a lot of these other things, but you have to build the sustainable business first,
Okay.
so that you're getting organic traffic, you're getting organic leads, you're getting sphere of influence leads, all these different lead sources. So that's how we build community, or we
Collaborate. Yeah.
collaborate,
Yeah.
by really sharing what's working, what's not working.
Yeah.
I've
No,
been part of brokerages where there's none of that. It's all like, go figure it out on your own. We're not going to share any secrets like that. Go figure it out on your own. Go watch YouTube channel.
yeah. And then just take their cut and kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
and the thing is, like, most of the stuff you get on the internet doesn't work in your local market. So
that's right. Yeah, I totally
you
agree.
have, I mean, you have to go to, and I know, like, there are real estate groups, real estate agents that gather on a regular basis and share kind of what's working in their area and what's not working. And sometimes you have to go outside of your brokerage, which is really sad in a lot of ways. Like, if you're not getting that kind of community from your brokerage that you're currently at, you need to start looking for something else.
Hmm.
Because honestly, like, you have to ask yourself all the time, like, what am I paying for?
Okay. And then one last thing, as we kind of close out here, I would love, you have something I think is kind of interesting and unique also, like you always often talk about, right? And trying to master this part is trying to provide that, compensation and competitive compensation and incentives for your team. Like, any thoughts, any ideas? And I know that there's not a one size fits all kind of thing. And you've learned a lot throughout the years. You've like, I mean, all of us have, right? Like you've grown your team, you've lost some, but you've grown and you've had more success than mistakes kind of thing. So any thoughts on that part that you care to share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, you need to be part of a brokerage that has a capping model. On at the end of the day, you got to have a capping model. If you don't have a capping model, then you're essentially overpaying for the amount of effort that you're doing.
Mm.
And that's the bottom line, like,
For
you
the
know,
individual, the capping, or
yeah.
for
So
with the
like, if
team?
you're going to be an individual agent, like, you need to be part of a, even if you're not an individual agent, like, you still need to have some sort of capping model, or some way to be compensated back for the amount of money that you spend at the brokerage. So like at Real Broker, we have a 12K cap, and then our team is a 70-30. So that
Yeah.
way, once you've kind of met the minimum requirement for the brokerage, that, the team still is being able to sustain the agent, through the tools that they have on a local level. And again, going back to what I said earlier, is if you're not being supported on a local level, then you need to reevaluate where you're at, because you shouldn't have to go and comb around the internet and try to find, the tips and tricks and stuff like that, or go outside of your brokerage to get those resources. Because if you're not getting those resources, then what, again, going back to evaluate, what is it that you're actually paying for?
Mm.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's kind of like if you were to buy a car and then there's no gas tank, but yet you still got to make the monthly payment on the car. I mean, if the vehicle doesn't get you from point A to point B, then what are you paying for?
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
hunk of junk.
A hunk of metal, man.
A hunk of metal, and nobody wants to pay for a hunk of metal because you got to be able to
Yeah.
get from point A to point B, which is, picking the right brokerage model. And I've been at the traditional, I've been at the cloud based, I've been at the indie brokerage, so I know the different models and how they compare. And honestly, for me, I mean, at the end of the day, it's how can I do what I do and get the widest reach, the most leverage, the most amount of technology for the least and minimal amount of out of pocket expenses.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So there you goes, folks. Like, as we wrap it up, I mean, this is great. Like, I've always kind of like remembered what you've shared, and I'm glad that we're able to kind of share. This is the first time I've heard you talk about more in depth, like the synthesizer. I know we always talk quite a bit, right? So I'm going to summarize, right? Know your team's identity, so that you know where your true north is for yourself and for your team as well too. Leveraging your network when you're recruiting, don't try and like advertise, because through your networks, through relationships, you build a stronger team as well too. And I've heard you say that many a times. And then building a collaborative environment. I mean, I know yours is, you've always talked about like getting together. I know during COVID it was a challenge for you, but like you got back into it as soon as you could as well too, because you've always fostered a collaborative environment, and that helps it to be sticky, to be honest with you. When you guys weren't meeting, I remember some of the challenges you went through as well too, right? And it wasn't because of you, it was just the circumstances with the COVID.
Yeah. And you just can't create what you want to create through a virtual lens in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. It's
Yeah.
just hard.
It is hard. It is hard. I mean, and even if you were working in a virtual brokerage, in a sense, as is like they don't have, with real, you've got multiple offices, but it's not in your area. So you really have to kind of build that relationship, in person, even though it's an online brokerage.
Yep.
And then the last thing that is like making sure that you've got a program of compensation for your team too. So I think this is really great. Love to, we'll start covering a couple more episodes on this, the next couple of episodes, and cover about recruiting and then maintain the talent, right? Any last parting thoughts and wisdom on this topic of recruiting?
Honestly, just look at your numbers, figure out how much is coming in and how much is going out.
Fair enough.
Because as a real estate agent, you need to treat your business as a business. And and this is, I'm very passionate about this, and maybe sometimes I don't articulate it in such a way that's warm and fuzzy, but at the end of the day, like, I know there's a lot of agents out there that are struggling,
Yeah.
and they're just like, and the biggest thing is change is hard. Change is hard, especially if you've been at a brokerage for a really long time and you're like, I love my broker. I love him because he's such a helpful guy. But love and affection doesn't pay the bills,
Yeah.
and
It could run
sometimes
you into the ground, actually.
yeah, and that's kind of the weird part about this business is like sometimes we do things that may not be the most efficient for our business because we have a fun environment, and fun is don't get me wrong, fun makes
Fun.
going to work fun, right?
Yes.
Not
Yeah.
to be redundant, but fun doesn't have any kind of monetary value. Because I'll tell you, like, when I used to, back in the day before I became a real estate agent, I worked at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and they have sales, but it's selling that insurance, but I
Yeah.
never actually added anything to my bottom line. But we were rewarded with like dinners and like little outings and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
it didn't pay the bills.
Yeah.
So again, very fun job, but I never made any more money.
Yeah.
So at
Yeah.
the end of the day, like, that's something that is just something you have to just internalize and decide what's best for you guys. And so I'm open to having any conversations about Real Broker, what we're doing, where we're headed, the technology that we're developing as a company on the Real Broker side of things, and just really what our ultimate goals are. And love to chat with anybody that's interested in that. So if you want to get a hold of me at 307 772-1184. Text the word real, and happy to have a conversation. And Khek, how can people get a hold of you?
Well, you know what? Check out my website. You can book a time there and to kind of just chat and talk about marketing, talk about real estate in general as well too. The website is Fieldnotes.ai, or you can call me directly 425-740-0260.
Awesome. All right. Well, that'll conclude another episode of Getting Real in the Field. Peace.
Peace.